Good morning, John. How you doing,
Hey,
buddy?
John. How you doing?
I'm excellent. How are y'all?
Oh, we're good. We're good, John.
Barry's got all the answers, John.
Coach, before we get started, the first question I'd like to ask is, I know this is a radio partnership with you and Barry, but what I'd really like to know is Barry compensating you at the level that he should be, and are those checks arriving on time?
Let me say this. I question it every month, but I don't say anything. I question it very, very deeply every month. You're exactly right.
He's got a lot more money. I got,
guy.
John. I got a lot of kids to feed.
That doesn't mean I got to get up at 6 o'clock every morning.
Yeah. So, hey, John, tell us. John obviously was at Alabama for numerous years. Was over at Tennessee as associate athletic director. Just recently took the job over at Southern Miss. How are things going over there in Hattiesburg, John?
Going really well. Been on the job right at 3 months. It's been, really exciting. I walked into a great baseball season. Our baseball program was, ranked in the top 25 pretty much the entire year. We were able to host a baseball regional this past weekend, which is the second time ever that we've hosted a baseball regional. Won more games than any regular season games than any Southern Miss baseball team. Won Conference USA outright, which we haven't done, I believe, since '03. So I walked into a really great situation with our baseball program. Our other sports have been really competitive. Looking forward to the fall with, football and all the sports kicking off.
That.
I know basketball has gone through way prior to you being there, some problems. Is it possible for basketball to pay for itself? Is that pretty hard?
I think at this level, Coach, I think in order for it to pay for itself, you've got to get to the tournament on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I think then it can pay for itself. If you look at the difference between Conference USA and the American Athletic Conference, and we used to be a part of that in the old Conference USA. Memphis and a lot of those other teams were our partners. The difference in the two leagues is really basketball. I think I saw some figures a while back where Conference, the American Athletic was getting like $20 million in NCAA tournament money, and Conference USA was getting about $2 million.
Yeah.
And so you look at the difference there between the two leagues. I would argue the football is very similar. They make a significant amount more revenue in basketball than Conference USA does.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're talking with Jon Gilbert, athletic director over at Southern Miss. John, let's talk scheduling a minute, football scheduling. We've kind of kicked around, Alabama's philosophy. Nick Saban opens up with a neutral game against a really, really good team. This year will be probably the best team that he's played. But then, is the rest of his schedule, the Mercers, Colorado State, Fresno State, they kind of buy those guys in, and they don't have to go on the road. But I got to think Southern Miss, that's got to be a very difficult place to schedule football games because you guys are really good. You can beat SEC teams on the road, which you've done in the past. So people really don't want to pay you to come there, but you really don't want to be bought. I mean, you want to get home games. What is y'all's philosophy there trying to get games? And just to share with the listeners maybe how difficult that actually is at Southern Miss.
Well, I would say in any football program, the most important thing is recruiting. I would say 1B, and not too far behind recruiting, is scheduling. And you can put together a schedule that can help your coach. You can put together a schedule that can hurt your coach and program. And so I think philosophically, and I'm going to talk about my previous two places, Alabama and Tennessee, for a minute. I do think it's important to schedule good games, both home and neutral site. We did that both at my time at Alabama and Tennessee. As you look at Southern Miss, we're fortunate enough we've got the Kentucky Wildcats coming to Hattiesburg to open the season, and we were fortunate to get that game where, we ran into, there were not many opponents available to play, and so we were able to leverage that with Kentucky. So we'll actually get them here in Hattiesburg to open the season, and then in late November we go to Tennessee. I would tell you, ideally, we'd like to schedule one Power 5 game a year, and then schedule some regional opponents, home and home. We just did a deal with Tulane recently, a 4-year deal with them that will give us an opportunity to go to New Orleans, give their fans the opportunity to travel here. It's a close game. It's good for both opponents. I'm in favor of regional scheduling for us. There are some instances where I would tell you we've got to play 2 bye games. Most of that is predicated on the finances. And when you do that, you want to try to make it as advantageous as you can for your football program.
Yeah, but will people buy Southern Miss? Because the worst thing you can do is buy a team and they come in there and beat you, and you guys can go just about anywhere and beat people. So many people are buying the Mercers and the Fresno States of the world. But will people buy Southern Miss?
They will. They will buy us, because if you just look at the numbers, there's 65, Power 5 teams, and I think they're 64 Group of 5. And so they need us as much as we need them. And as you look at the Idahos of the world, I think Idaho announced they were dropping down from FBS to FCS. And so you can only play one FCS team. Well, those schools are a dime a dozen. I mean, there are a lot of really good 1AA or FCS schools out there. There are only so many FBS. And so when the SEC only plays 8 conference games, that gives the schools like Southern Miss the opportunity to schedule them, because they have to, other than one FCS school, they've got to pick up some FBS games, which makes it advantageous for us.
Yeah, Dave.
I know recruiting becomes a big budget for you. Certainly football. One thing about the state of Mississippi, it's had good football. High school football in Mississippi, and the numbers are not real high, but they've had good football and basketball too. Do y'all try to sort of circle the area of Mississippi's and the southern states in football to recruit, or do you have some other particular place that you try to go?
We really try to stick with the state of Mississippi. We do like going into Alabama, the Panhandle of Florida, New Orleans. If you look where Hattiesburg is located, we're an hour and a half from Mobile. We're 2 hours from New Orleans. We can get into the Panhandle of Florida pretty quickly. So I would say regionally, we're really fortunate where we're located. I would tell you we've got really good high school football coaches in the state of Mississippi. So we feel like the state has really good high school football. And certainly if you look at the history of Southern Miss athletics, we've benefited from a lot of in-state kids.
Yeah, Mississippi's a great football state, I think.
John, obviously you were at Tennessee for a while. There's been, I don't think any administration said it over there. I guess maybe John Adams wrote an article about Tennessee not playing Alabama anymore, that it wasn't, I don't know if he used the word fair. Is there any talk about that? I mean, what's your take on that? Should, if I were Tennessee, I don't know that I would want to play Alabama every year. I'd maybe want to rotate it around. It seems like it makes it more difficult to win the SEC when they're stuck on your schedule the third weekend in October most of the time. Was there any talk about that over there, or is that kind of a tradition and a rivalry that can never be taken away?
Well, I think the first thing you have to remember is that Alabama is, I think they're on like a 10-game winning streak. But it really is all cyclical. I can remember, my first several years at Alabama, I think we went on a 6-year losing streak to Tennessee. And so I do think at the end of the day it evens out. It's a good game for the fan bases. Historically, it's been a really good game. So I think for the good of college football, it would not be a good thing to take that away. I would be in favor of, and was in favor of 9 league games in the SEC. I think you can then get into a rotation with other teams where your fan bases can see different games on a more consistent basis. That I think would take care of it, but I would not be in favor of that game going away, just based on where they are in the cyclical cycle of losing.
Yeah, John, I want to ask you this as an AD. Dad and I talked about it. I look at Chad Holbrook, who was let go last night by Ray Tanner. I was at South Carolina. Ray Tanner was the guy. He was the legend there. You even take Philip Fulmer leaving Tennessee, when Bear Bryant left Alabama, when Dean Smith left North Carolina. And it goes on and on and on. And Dad and I talk about it all the time about, boy, when poor Greg Burns got to hire the replacement for Nick Saban. Wow. What makes it so difficult to follow the guy? It seemed like everything would be in place. The program's got great tradition. They're winning. But it seems like whoever follows the guy, a guy that has to follow Saban or follow these other guys, John, what makes that so difficult to do?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just the sheer expectation.
Exactly.
Every fan base, and it really doesn't matter what school you pick, they all have, to a point, I would say, unrealistic expectations. And so the expectation at Alabama is to win, 10-plus games a year, compete for a championship, and, if God forbid you only win 9 games and you don't compete for a championship, then it hadn't been a successful season. And you both know this, having worked in athletics. To manage a roster, you're going to go through periods where you've got young teams, the dynamic of the team is different than the year before. And I think when you look at replacing a coach or just plain hiring a coach for a team at that level, that new coach, when Coach Saban, walks in the door, the expectation is much higher than I would say when Coach Saban took over.
Yeah.
When he took over, he had a little bit of a grace period. Well, as successful as he's been, there are still real pressures that he faces every day that, he handles it like a professional, but you both know, having worked in the industry, that's tough.
Yeah, but as administrator, how do you guys handle that? Like, you take a situation where the guy's probably the right guy, but he's not, it's not going well, and the fans now with social media and all that, they're just beating you guys up, they're beating the coach up, and it just gets to be such a negative deal around the program, but you got to hang with the guy because it's the right thing to do. How difficult is that? I think that's one of the hardest jobs as an administrator.
Well, actually, Barry, I don't think it's hard. I think, one, you've got to partner with your coach, and when I say partner with them, you've got to help establish what those expectations are. Excuse me. And what I mean by that, like when I'm going to go back to when Butch Jones took over at Tennessee, we knew, looking at the roster of who was leaving the program, who was graduating, the transition of, transfers and all that. We told Butch coming in that first year, Butch, your roster really is not at a level where it should be competitively in the SEC. You're going to have to recruit to really replenish that that roster. And so the first year we were really close at being bowl eligible. Ended up going 5-7, and then he had a really good recruiting class. We still knew that second year, hey, we're going to be really young. He did a really good job recruiting, and we helped set those expectations of, hey, if we're good enough to get into a bowl game, go 6-6, it really is going to be a great year. And so we started talking about that. You know, Jay Hobson did a really good job last year. They ended up 7-6 here, beat Louisiana Lafayette in the bowl game. I would tell you, you know, just looking at the roster, we lost a lot of upperclassmen, key positions. We're going to be really young in some areas, and while I do think we're going to be really competitive, I do think if we can get into a bowl game, it will be a really good year for Southern Miss football. And so I think now, as an administrator, I've got to help, educate our fan base and talk to them about, partner with Jay and say, we're going to be really competitive. I love the recruiting class that Jay and his staff brought in, but I also know that based on where we are, that getting to a bowl game will be a really good year for us this year. And so I think it's our job to partner with our coaching staff and help set those expectations.
Yep. Dad, anything else for Jon before we let him get to work?
Well, I think one other thing, I think one of the big things behind the scenes is that money comes in from getting a fundraiser. And I don't think that's going to be easy, but I think there are some people that Southern Miss alums who've got some money, lots of it. And getting a fundraiser, may already have one, but I think that, that adds to the money that you get from playing. So I'm sure that's going to be really important. And I guess it's really important. I guess that's the question I'm asking you, is fundraising going to be a big part of some other people on your staff?
It will be, Coach. I would tell you it's something that I think about constantly.
Yeah.
Not only with ticket sales, buy games, sponsorships, but we need to engage an entire community and get them to invest in our program. And really, what they're doing, they're not investing in me personally. They're investing in the health and well-being of our student athletes. They're investing in the success of Southern Miss athletics. And so I tell them all the time, if you have the resources to buy a ticket, I need you to buy a ticket. If you have the resources to, endow a scholarship, we need you to do that. If you have the resources to put your name on a building, we need you to do that. Everybody plays a part, and in order for this program to be successful, we need the entire community to be engaged. And so I've spent a lot of time of my early tenure here getting out into the community, meeting people and establishing those relationships.
I could get you Wimp and Sonny to come down there and speak for free, Jon. Would that do you any good down there? Wimp and Sonny?
It would, but I was hoping that Coach could help me get into that golf tournament in the spring where they have checks. I didn't get a check this year. I didn't get invited, so I'm hoping I can get
Dad,
invited.
you got to get him to the Jimmy Rain
I'd get him in there.
That guy's an AD now. How about Brett Favre? He can give you some money. He helping y'all out over there?
Brett has been really engaging since I've been here. He's been great. He's at real big supporter of baseball and some of our other sports, and so he's been very engaged with our athletic department, very generous with his time and investment. So he's beloved around here, and couldn't be a better ambassador for Southern Miss athletics.
Well, Jon, we appreciate it, buddy. Tell your wife and kids to hello, and we'll take care of little Larson when she gets down there in Alabama. Jenny will wash all her clothes for her, so she'll spoil her.
Well, I'm hoping that we can figure out how to. I spent 16 years in the Alabama athletic department. I was hoping I could figure out how to get in-state tuition, or at least do you think they could, Finest could help put Larson on the Bryant scholarship?
Call Wendell Hudson. He's got all the connections with that. Call Wendell. He'll figure it out for you. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.